was a Saturday summer morning, and it was already light outside the window. The July sun was streaming its rays into the untidy room as usual. Nicholas was still sleeping like a dead man. Even the sounds of life outside the window could not seem to wake him. But no, as soon as the melody of his cell phone began to play, Kolya suddenly jumped up, looked at his watch, and with the words, "Damn, it's 9," took the phone in his hands. The display glowed with the name Romka. "Allo? Well, where the hell are you? We've been waiting for you." The deal was 9 o'clock sharp, at the bus station. "All right, I'm coming. I overslept. Come on. I want you there in half an hour." After these words Kolya hung up and ran to get dressed. Strangely enough, he already had everything ready. The backpack was packed. All that remained was to throw it on his shoulders, go downstairs and began to think, "Most likely we will have to catch a hitchhiker," continued the thought our hero. Coming down and out into the street, Kolya began to vote. He was lucky, a 9-car stopped in front of him. "To the bus station, 200. He shouted. "Get in, let's go." He got an answer. At 9:20 he was already there. 3 disgruntled boys were waiting for him at the bus station, Roma, Vanya, and Max. "Well, what took you so long?" Roma shouted when he saw Nikolai. "Sorry, guys, after yesterday's," started Nikolai. "Enough excuses," smiling interrupted him Vanya. "All guys, let's load up, our bus is leaving." Max started rushing us. The road was boring and tedious. The guys slept for the first half of the trip, and did a little bit of everything during the second half. Someone was listening to music, someone was surfing the internet on his smartphone, and Kolya was just staring out the window. A sign outside the bus window appeared, "The Republic of Karelia." Then a stop, at which our guys got off. A car was waiting there to take the guys to the pier. They were impatient to get on the boat, get to some island and go fishing. The sun was already high. It was getting late. The boys arrived safely at their destination and began to set up camp. Well, as a camp, 2 tents, a shelter from the rain, a table equipped for eating and more, and also constructed something like a stove from stones, for cooking all sorts of delicacies. "I suggest we make a fire and have something to drink. We'll go fishing tomorrow, but today we must have a rest from the road," said Roman, who was supported by everyone. The group built a fire, sat around the fire, started drinking. They had a few cases of beer and a couple of bottles of vodka with them, which they had stocked up at the wharf store, chatting, and, as always happens, singing along with the guitar. Ivan played the instrument very well. Time passed, and it started to get dark. Roma decided to go to bed, because on that day he got up earlier than anyone else, and when it was completely dark and the moon was illuminating the area, the other guys also went to bed. The fire had long since gone out, only a few pieces of wood remained, which continued to smolder, leaving behind small flames. The hikers and fishing enthusiasts slept very soundly. Everyone except Roma, who was sensitive to the slightest rustle, which later woke him up. He opened his eyes, and, looking up into the tent, listened attentively to the silence around him. Nothing. but he was about to close his eyes again when something cut through his sensitive hearing. It was footsteps approaching from the thicket of the island to the tents. Vanyok must be walking. Sleepy, now he can't sleep, thought Roma. The footsteps kept getting closer and closer, and were quite close. And when they reached the tent they were silent. A sniffling sound was heard, as if someone was breathing heavily. After a short stand, footsteps were heard again, making a circle around one tent and heading toward the other. He must have drunk too much, but he didn't mix up the tent, thought Roma again about Vanya, and then everything fell silent. Suddenly Roma had to pee. After a short time of rummaging and breaking the tent, and listening to Max's whining that his actions disturbed his sleep, Roma was outside. After stretching out, as people do after a long lie-in, he headed for the nearest bushes, the way to which was through a dining area with a rain shelter. As he walked past this dining area, Roma saw someone lying on a makeshift bench. Ha! That's Vanek, he didn't find the tent after all, the wino. Not very loudly, he said aloud. After finishing his important business, Roman went back. Passing by the place for dinner, he stopped, glanced again at the sleeping man and moved on, and after a couple of moments he was in the tent where he was already lying inside, listening to the night sounds of nature. Suddenly he heard footsteps again, and they were approaching him fast. Roma poked his head out and saw Kolya. Roma, how are you? Who's there drunkenly walking around, messing up the tents? Max? No, I think it's Vanek. Max is sleeping here, he didn't even get up, Roman answered smiling. You're shitting me. Vanya sleeps in the tent. I heard footsteps, he walks, then stands there, then stands there. I thought he'd had a few drinks, and now in his sleep he couldn't find his place. Stop. If Max is here, Vanya is there, then who is sleeping under the tent in the street? Surprised and batting his eyes, Roman asked, and then frightened he ran out of the tent, took a flashlight and shaking hands began to shine a light on the spot where the unknown man was lying. It was Max. What are you doing here? Roma shouted at him. Shit! Who's in your tent then, Rom? Kolya shouted. Yeah, what are you yelling about? Let me sleep. Max started talking in a slurred voice. What's going on here? Ivan came out of the tent. Then Roma and Kolya looked at each other, and Nikolai took a knife and they went towards Roma's tent, while Max and Vanya followed, unable to understand anything. As they got closer to it and pointed the light in the right direction, they were horrified. There was a hole in the wall of the tent, as if someone had ripped it open with his claws, and the sleeping bags were torn to shreds. What the fuck is that? Max asked with horror. I'm shocked. Vanya added. After a short while thinking, the guys built a fire, they still had the wood and dry fuel from yesterday, and began to sit and look with dull eyes filled with fear into the small island forest, dreading every rustle. The silence was interrupted by Roma. Max, how did you end up outside? I did not lie down in the tent, I decided to lie down under the canopy. I heard footsteps, someone stopped near me and sniffed. I thought it was one of you going to the bathroom and couldn't find your place. I suspected it was you, because you said something about Vanka when you passed me. Yet, I was walking by thinking that Vanya was looking for a tent and got sidetracked outside. And I heard someone walking, Nikolai started, and I thought that one of you got lost, pointing to Roma and Max continued Kolya, got out of the tent and no one was there. Who ripped up the sleeping bags like that? Vanya added. So they sat all night speculating about what it was, in fear that this something would come back, but this time they would be hurt, just like Roma and Max's sleeping bags were hurt. When it began to dawn, the fear began to leave the guys, and one by one they began to fall asleep. So they sat and slept by the fire, which gradually began to fade with the first ray of sunlight. The boys did not yet know that many unexpected surprises awaited them.